And we thought, when we actually were thinking together with Steffi in London a few months ago about the art panels at this DLD, that it could be interesting to address NFT, but from a different angle, because there has been so much discussion about NFT and the art market, and of course NFT and speculation, but we thought it would be interesting, and it was very inspired actually by a conversation we had with Refik, whose work you just saw, when Refik said that he thinks that NFT is the new public art. So we thought it would be interesting to explore that, to think about actually possibilities of things which can actually happen with NFT, to maybe create new circuits also for art, new forms of accessibility. And so we are incredibly delighted to have, besides Refik, who needs no introduction because we've already seen the work, to have with us Emily Segal and Rafaël Rozendaal, who both have been actually with us at DLD for a long time. So please give a very, very warm welcome to Refik, to Emily, and to Rafaël. And before joining them on the panel, just a few words about Emily's and Rafael's practice. Emily actually is the co-founder of Nemesis Global, an artist, a writer, and also a trend forecaster. Emily is the author of the novel Mercury Retrograde, actually New York Times Editor Choice of 2020, and also the founder of a new publishing house, Deluge Books. Has a lot to do, as you will see afterwards, with NFT, a very unexpected connection between publishing and NFT. NFT basically enabling books to happen in a completely new way. And of course also, Emily is the author of Knots NFT, a project which you can see on Knots, NOTS.live, which is another seminal experiment really at the intersection of literature and Web3. Emily, of course, is the co-founder of K-Hole and was here at DLD exactly 9 years ago for the 89 Plus panel. Soon after, Emily launched with her colleagues the concept Normcore at the Serpentine, where all of a sudden, after doing a conference with Emily, a word she coined at that conference became the word of the year. So we, of course, cannot wait to hear what will be the new words of the year from Emily today. Another very warm welcome to Emily Segal.
Thank you. Hello.
And then Rafaël Rozendaal is, of course, a pioneering artist. We spoke about it actually with Refik this morning, how much actually Rafaël has pioneered the field of digital art, has used the internet as a canvas, has done very early on projects with websites, installations, lenticulars, writings, and of course the whole works with domain names. And it is fascinating that in 2020, Rafaël was still quite skeptical about the idea of blockchain, so it will be very interesting today to hear from him where he sees the potential. Another very warm welcome to Rafaël Rozendaal. And then, of course, we are very, very grateful to Refik for this great presentation. A very warm welcome to Refik Anadol. And I thought to begin with the beginning, it would be maybe great, because we've seen Refik's work, to now hear more about Emily's practice and how you actually came to blockchain technology, because it all happened sort of over the last couple of years, and how you started your publishing house and then also your own NFT projects.
Certainly. So I also was quite skeptical of the crypto space, having lived in Berlin in 2017 when a lot of my cool artist and musician friends were all of a sudden standing around basically talking about finance and stocks all day, which I thought was super boring. And then I only really got interested in a deep way when NFTs started blowing up, because all of a sudden art and culture were in the mix. And I had also recently begun Deluge Books, which is a publishing house I founded with friends in New York and Los Angeles that tries to find the intersection between experimental literary work and the type of fun, bingey, pulpy books that you can't put down. And we're so dedicated to experimentation, but that to me also means that innovating the economies and systems around the way that the work is made is also essential. And I've been very inspired by many of my friends and colleagues who are artists and musicians for sort of pioneering that. So basically, I had dreamed up an idea for a new novel, and I was banging my head against the wall because I realized that my method of jumping in and out of writing this novel while also working on various other projects wasn't working at all. And I actually needed a deep, immersive period of concentration. And around that time, the platform Mirror had launched a tool for doing crowdfunds with crypto for different types of writing, and I figured, why not give it a shot? And so, in the spirit of throwing spaghetti against the wall, I basically wrote a proposal, but in a more fun and warm-hearted way, perhaps, than one writes a proposal to a publishing company. I said, this is who I am, this is my concept for the book, this is the type of immersion that I need to build the world that I'm thinking of. And it was fully funded to the tune of basically a fantastic advance in 13 hours by 104 people. Those people got a token called Novel. It was the first time the book had been funded in this way, so that was an exciting thing to participate in. And then eventually, when the book is a little bit more cooked, those same people will get the proceeds kind of returned to them from an excerpt of the book and then a first edition NFT book, the form of which remains to be seen, invented, and realized. About a year after that project happened, and also in that interval, I managed to get a lot of work done on this book much more quickly and with a kind of amazing freshness of just knowing that there was this group of people who were supportive in this way. I worked quite a lot on the book, and then I also realized, hey, it's actually going to be a really long time before the people who funded this book get to see a polished excerpt of text, just because novels take ages to write, which is one of the reasons that I love them, and maybe you guys love them as well. And around that time, a formal interest in knots sort of progressed into something more conceptual, and I was noticing, so knots, there's a knot on the cover of my novel, Mercury Retrograde. It became sort of a motif and an emblem that I was incredibly fascinated by because it seemed to suggest a literary situation without resolving it. And I noticed a bunch of different NFT projects that presented hundreds or thousands of variations on a theme. And I realized that knots fit perfectly into that. Knots also have an amazing historical resonance with ledgers. I could go on and forever, and I won't bore you with it now, but happy to say much more about that. And also, knot theory kind of pushes the edges of our ability to understand and compute the different types of hyperspaces and different possibilities created out of something very simple, which I think is also what literature does. So I created an NFT collection called Knots, and in a kind of sneaky way, I put the first paragraph of the book in progress in a sphere around each one. So it's actually reflected in each of the artworks, but you can't quite read it. And then a significant portion of the proceeds from the sale of the collection goes to funding Deluge Books and gets redistributed to other artists and writers who are working on experimental literature.
Thank you so much, and there's a perfect transition actually, Rafaël, because for you also this idea of redistribution is important, and that actually NFTs can help produce reality. You said in 2020 that you have real doubts about this technology, and then more recently saw potential. So it would be great to hear what caused your change of mind, and also maybe hear more about what you're actually doing with NFTs, and to which extent it's maybe different also from the work you do with domain names. And I was also very curious about what you recently said about audiences, which I think is interesting, because you said that one of the things that's been powerful about crypto is that there is an audience that is very knowledgeable about the material. Kind of, they understand browser glitches, they understand how to save these works, also kind of a long durational aspect.
So I always cared about the audience first, and that's why I started with internet art in 1999. I thought we should make work that is visible at any time, any place in the world. That was always what you were saying about public sculpture. So I also imagine with digital art, you develop an art history that is completely accessible. You don't have to travel to see the work. You can see all of art history, of digital art. So I wanted it to be online and user-friendly. And the domain name is such a human thing. You go to imveryverysorry.com, and you don't even have to write it down. You can remember it, and you can go there. And when blockchain started, it was very user-unfriendly. So I felt like you're excluding so many people if you work on the blockchain, because most people have no idea how to get started. But I think last year it started to get more user-friendly, and that's the moment where I thought, And the thing I didn't think is that from a buying perspective, blockchain is much more user-friendly than the gallery. So the gallery, I didn't realize, but I've built up this big audience, and it's an audience that is not comfortable around galleries. They feel a little bit intimidated by museums and this culture of, the gallery can be intimidating, and this idea that now all of a sudden they can buy work without talking to anyone and trade it freely and own it, and this, so at first I was I was focused on the viewing, that was the internet art, and now it's focused on solidifying the relationship with this big audience. And as it went along, I did find out, like, oh, a lot of these people are coders as well. So they are actually they're the right audience also to preserve the work, they understand the work, they see the details, so that was a happy surprise. I didn't plan that, but I was like, oh, this is really a good fit.
And can you maybe give us an example about one or two of your NFT projects?
Yeah, I made one project on, my initial works on the NFT were an extension of my domain work, so they were what you call one-of-ones. But then I started going more towards generative works, so they are algorithms that generate 1,000 or 500 or 300 variations on a theme, on an abstraction. And I really loved this idea that you have one algorithm that generated 500 artworks, and people start really looking more intently because there's value attached to it. So people start discussing, why is red more beautiful than blue? Which I think is, AI is great for showing us many options, but I think it's still humans that choose options. AI doesn't reduce, AI expands, and it's still humans that then start discussing, and to me, mystery is the greatest thing. So this mystery of, like, why is one composition more compelling than another? That's one of the key things I found interesting of NFT, that you have these groups of works, and because of the value, people really look more concentrated.
Would you agree, Refik, with that? And it would be actually great to hear also, in terms of what Rafaël just said about, the audiences, also multiplying audiences. Maybe you could tell us a bit more about your famous quote that NFT are the new public art.
Yeah, so 100% agree, by the way, with this. The intricacy of, like, technology, sometimes welcoming, sometimes very, like, far away. It happened in the AI, I think happening in the quantum computation, and most likely happening in blockchain. So we always need machines so far, right? Like for telescopes, microscopes, like somehow machines around us. But I think I agree with that, because the moment that for me, the experience itself is the value in life, and then I found that the experience of, like, choosing what is unique, what is not, or why there is that and this, that. I think questioning mechanism in NFT space is very exciting. The other part is, I think, as I mentioned, like, I hope that metaverse is beyond just wearing a boring television on our face. And with creative culture, we learned that it's like a campfire. Like, we came together and create some ecosystem, thoughtful questions. Not all of them are depth enough, maybe, but at least there's dialogue and questions. And I think public art is very important, in my opinion, because it's, at the end, it's transparent, open, distributed wealth. And it's open, and you can trace back every single decision if you wish. And it's really exciting. The other thing that I think, I hope we can find more meaningful way of charity context. Like a month ago, we were able to raise $2.5 million for St. Jude Children's Hospital. And I know that you also raise incredible numbers for open source software communities.
Yeah.
So there are ways of using this technology in a way different than what we are seeing every single day.
Yeah, and I think art is going to become like music, where it's more embedded in your life. And so you don't think of the authentic work. You listen to a song in the shower, in the car, on your way to work, at a concert, at a wedding, and it becomes a part of your life. And I think art is not just going to be in a museum, but it's going to become part of your life, that you grow up and your identity forms around visual art as much as music. So I think we're seeing just the beginning. This is, to me, NFT is similar to the start of recorded music, where music just was freed from the opera hall and just was everywhere and part of people's lives.
I also think that there's something about both the technology and the culture around NFTs that is really breaking down the division between design and art, or between all of these various disciplines. And that's something that people find quite cheesy or irritating, but I think has a lot of beautiful possibilities. And so I imagine that that will become even more extreme. So the type of art that you're mentioning that's embedded into your life might not really resemble what our parents or grandparents thought of as art at all.
Yeah, the same way an EDM track doesn't resemble an opera, or maybe it does. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, one thing, I know that we have very little time left, but I just want to address quickly, because I think it's important, is of course the fact that blockchain transactions actually consume huge amounts of energy. Yeah. And I spoke to Vitalik Buterin a few years ago, and of course the proof of stake is going to happen, but it's not yet happened. How do you address that with your project, the whole environmental dimension? And
yeah, we definitely compute, and we look at the patterns of what we did and try to analyze it. I mean, it's a data, open and public, nothing to hide, nothing to share. I mean, it's obviously there. And as you mentioned, I hope that this is the summer they are thinking the birth of Ethereum will be the birth of probably a new movement. But there are great other side chains, Tezos, Avalanche, Algorand, who many artists practicing proudly. Great that we have many solutions than just one option.
Anyone else wants to comment on that?
I've purchased carbon offsets for the projects that I've done, but that's only one step, and it's imperfect in certain ways, but it's something that we can do in the meanwhile before things become more sustainable.
Last question. I was kind of curious, what blockchain or NFT can do for you that other tools can't. And then in addition to that, my kind of favorite question about the unrealized projects, because we know a lot about architects' unrealized projects, and of course, as you could see in the presentation before, Refik works a lot with architects and urbanists actually, and goes into this idea of blockchain kind of urbanism. And we know really architects' unrealized projects because they publish them, but we seldomly know artists' unrealized projects because they don't publish them. So I'm very curious, what can blockchain do that other tools can't do? And what have you not yet been able to do with this technology you would like to do? Maybe an unrealized project, maybe an utopia, maybe, also the sort of whole idea, because I think it's interesting, Ben, because always says there is a societal dimension in terms of this whole new blockchain technology, and we need to kind of think about it. Maybe could it lead to new forms of social sculpture?
Mm-hmm. Well, my utopia is, I really see that we went from an agrarian society to an industrial society, and then we'll go to an artistic society where automation will take care of all jobs, and everybody is either a scientist or an artist. I think there's no other jobs left. So I think we have to, but I'm exaggerating, but we're really, I think it's the frog in the warm water story, but if you look at the percentage of the population that is in some way in a creative job or a creative life, it's very different than 100 years ago. The art world was so small. So I think we're headed there. It's really happening, and you'll see in 100 years, it's like a large amount of the population will be in a creative life.
Emily?
I really see a lot of potential for NFTs to usher in a new era of poetry that really makes clear the connection between poems and works of art, and also creates new economies around poetry that allows poets to live, because as you know, the poet Eileen Myles said, poets get utterly no piece of the pie, and that's been the case for far too long, so I see a major potential for revolution there.
It's actually interesting, I just spoke to Alice Notley, a great poet, about that very question, and it's urgent to find ways of actually make poetry center stage again. Refik?
And I think the dream is data land, I've mentioned in the last slide, a place where data ethically sourced, a place where we create our meta collector that is the most ethical researcher in the world. And the other one is, I think, Zaha Hadid, architects, honored to work with her life, her work, with Patrick Schumacher also. I think you were all here together in many years ago, researching on how to architect the metaverse using one of the most cutting-edge AI, OpenAI DALL-E 2, and connect them meaningfully and purposefully.
Could not be a more wonderful conclusion actually with Zaha, because indeed Zaha received the award here from Steffi, and she said here on this very stage actually of DLD that there should be no end to experimentation. Thank you so much. Thank you, Refik. Thank you, Emily. Thank you, Rafaël. Thank you all.